Hello and welcome back to another video. So, some time ago, while browsing YouTube for Wii U related content, I stumbled upon a curious little video by Shawn Long from RTG85 and Nintendo enthusiasts back in the day called 9 Fun Wii U eShop Games for the price of one retail game. And I thought to myself, what a fantastic idea for a video. The title is pretty self-explanatory. Shawn compiled a bunch of different indie games into one big package that cost $60 combined, and I was very surprised when I found out that nobody seems to have used the same premise for a video about indie games. Not even Shawn himself. There were no second parts, no follow-ups, nothing. And with that kind of videos, you usually just have people talk about a select few indies for like 10 minutes. Those are plentiful. But something like this, I think, is a bit different because there's a gimmick to it. The idea is that you could pay a full retail price of $60/euros for just one recent AAA title, or spend that money on a bunch of cool indie games, and I find this to be just a very cool concept. So I thought I'd make a follow-up to the video Shawn made, because if you go and look it up, you'll see that a lot of time has passed since then, and there's just so many other great indies out there that either came out on Wii U after that, or simply missed his list. Before we begin though, I want to give a small disclaimer. Yes, I am talking specifically about the indies that made it to the Wii U because that's where I played them, but none of them are actually exclusive to it. I don't think there are many indies out there that are exclusive to any one system really, so if any of my picks interest you but you don't have a Wii U, you can still get them elsewhere. I think this is a good way to straight up talk about great games, which is always relevant, while also appealing to the niche that is the Wii U enthusiast circle, I guess. I really like the Wii U, okay? Don't judge me. But with that being said, let's carry on with the lovely indies that I've picked. If you've ever heard anyone say anything about Lone Survivor, it's very likely it was something along the lines of "it's just like Silent Hill but in 2D. If you haven't heard anything about Lone Survivor, well, it's Silent Hill in 2D. Not so much in its presentation or structure or even gameplay, but rather in its atmosphere, sound design, and most importantly, idea. Like the better of the Silent Hill games, Lone Survivor's premise entails exploration of the depths of one's psyche, diving deep into the darkest corners of the protagonist's mind and visualizing and shaping whatever it is that lurks within in the form of the enemies you fight, various gameplay situations you end up in, and ultimately the world around you itself. Your goal in Lone Survivor is simple: escape. In doing so, you'll navigate your surroundings in search of key items, solve light puzzles, watch many bizarre interactions with a surprisingly big cast of characters, and of course, try not to lose yourself in the maze-like corridors swarmed by horrific monsters. And all that while managing your mental health. Careful choosing the food you eat or consuming everything you find lying on the floor, no matter how obviously bad for you it is, staying away from the fight and sneaking past the enemies, or going in guns blazing every chance you get, trying to normalize your state of being by going about your daily routine and allowing yourself to rest when need be, or rushing through while keeping yourself caffeinated and straight up refusing to sleep. Everything you do in Lone Survivor affects your character, and as such determines how his story ends. This is one of the very few games I've played that I feel deserves the title of a survival horror experience. Maybe not in the most straightforward of ways, but rather in a psychological one. You are trying to survive through a time of mental pain, and it's only up to you, the player, how you go about it. And on top of that, there's a ton of classic horror material in here as well, including nasty monsters, disturbing imagery, deliberately tough combat, and everything else you horror enthusiasts might expect from a title that wears its Silent Hill inspirations on its sleeve. So, whether you're interested in games that tackle complex psychological issues or just love yourself some horror, Lone Survivor gets a hearty recommendation from me. Contrary to my previous pick, Runner 2 is a game that's predominantly about having fun. Possibly even too much fun. As the name suggests, it's a runner game, but what makes it stand out is that nearly all of your actions are tailored to the music's rhythm. Jumping over the enemy or sliding under it, collecting pieces of gold scattered around, reflecting a projectile or kicking an obstacle, every single instance of these moves adds a nice little sound effect that contributes to the overall melody, and what you're essentially doing is you compose a music track throughout the entire level. It's incredibly satisfying to hit all of the intended notes, but what's interesting is that you can directly influence the form of melody. Every level contains 4 main pickups in the form of big red crosses, and running into them significantly changes the current music track, so if you like one part of the song better than the other, you can just skip all of the following crosses and enjoy the level even more. Runner 2 is very challenging too, and in a very good way at that. It requires just the right amount of skill, so its levels are neither a cakewalk nor irritatingly gnarly to beat. I enjoyed the challenge presented to me quite a fair bit. Now, we've established that the gameplay is very fun and satisfying, the music is great, and the challenge is there for those who want it. Let's talk about visual factors, shall we? The universe of BIT.TRIP is complete and utter nonsense. You've been looking at it this entire time, and if the first thing you thought wasn't what in the actual fuck, write to me and I will try and help you. Between celestial objects with faces, pickle people, encaged mountains that clearly aren't having a good day, and Charles Martinet, the voice of Mario, narrating this whole thing, it's difficult to say what I find more bizarre about it. Runner 2 is so gloriously ridiculous that its mere existence disrupts the very fabric of this industry that keeps telling us that everything has to be dark, miserable, and realistic. And it's absolutely wonderful. If you're into runner games, rhythm games, or simply weird stuff, you can't go wrong with Runner 2. Yearwalk caught me off guard, so to speak. I've heard good things about it, but I never really knew what it was and what to expect from it. So when I actually got around to playing it, it turned out to be the most terrifying gaming experience of my entire life. But let's start with the basics. Yearwalk is a horror game in which you can only walk right and left, step forward or backward in specific spots, and zoom in on various objects. Basically point and click, but with a bit of walking and in first person. All of that is pretty simple, but the horror bit is somewhat different. It's heavily based around Swedish folklore, specifically an old tradition of going into the woods at night in winter because of reasons. And while that might not sound terribly original, once the intro bit was done and the game got going, I was shivering with fear on every corner. I've never experienced anything of this kind when playing a horror game. This combination of old foreign folklore and unique presentation is what I think makes Yearwalk so effective at being scary. As you go through, you unlock numerous entries in the encyclopedia, which is very conveniently available to you at all times, and each page gives you more and more insight into the incredibly morbid nature of old Swedish traditions. The stuff that's written in there is legitimately horrifying. The game's ultimate goal is to figure out what the forest wants of you, which entails a lot of puzzles. This is a good place for us to segue into the unique properties of the Wii U version of this game, because Yearwalk was actually completely redone to utilize the platform's capabilities. Aside from the aforementioned encyclopedia, which can be browsed with touch controls, you also have the map and the notebook that are always available to you on the gamepad screen, and it's hard to imagine how you'd play the game without that. The puzzles you'll encounter will require memorization, and the notebook where you can write anything you want with the stylus is essential to solving them. It makes you feel like you're actually writing hints and important info down, and it's just as useful as it is immersive. Having the map right there on the screen is also a great touch. Because of the game's unusual presentation, traversing through the world can prove to be rather difficult, and on PC you have to pause it to go to the map screen. On Wii U, however, the process of figuring your path out is free from interruptions and feels much more natural as a result. I highly recommend you go and play Yearwalk. It's such a unique little game. If you like being terrified, if you like solving puzzles and immersing yourself in strange and freaky folklore, all of this is there. And if you're starving for Wii U games that actually utilize the system's features, this is a must-have. Unlike Yearwalk, SteamWorld Dig was a very relaxing experience for me. It's one of those games with a repetitive but very satisfying gameplay loop where you technically keep doing the same handful of tasks the entire way through, but unlike the worst examples of this kind of experiences, all of it is supported by the constant feeling of progression you get. There are always new things to see and do, and the game keeps rewarding you for your efforts with upgrades that significantly improve the gameplay itself, while also creating new challenges for you to overcome. And there's actually an interesting, albeit minimalistic story that unravels as you go through. In SteamWorld Dig, you play as an old robot who arrives at a small mining town where his late uncle used to live. Yes, robots have families in this universe, don't ask, and is determined to dig through the local mine to find out, literally, what lies beneath. And that's exactly what you do. You dig through the ground itself, and the brilliant twist here is that you choose where and how you do that. There are certain objects that you can't do anything about, of course, so that you don't just go straight down, but for the most part, you lay down your own path. And I think that's legitimately brilliant. The game gives you the task and provides you with tools. Everything you do from there is your call. More games need to do that. The mine, of course, isn't empty. It's brimming with hostile creatures, various environmental hazards, and also precious materials that you'll use to upgrade yourself, which in a true Metroidvania fashion will grant you new equipment and skills that will be put to test in the many puzzles the game's got in store for you. So no, even if the central gameplay mechanic here is digging, it's not just mining through and through. The story I briefly touched upon isn't anything mind-blowing, but it does keep things going, dropping bits of exposition here and there, having multiple NPCs talk to you about the town, the mine, and various key characters, and most importantly, changing the scenery at points, which doesn't just keep you interested, but also provides new layers to the game's world. It also has a clear ending point, so it's not one of those endless games that shower you with mindless busywork and do nothing to incentivize you to go back to it. Oh, and have I mentioned it's all done in a Western style, complete with cowboys and funny accents? Yeah, that's also a thing. I enjoyed my time with SteamWorld Dig a lot, and I feel confident in saying it's pretty great, so I recommend you give it a try. I too never knew digging into the ground could be so fun. And finally, we reach possibly my favorite indie game of all time. Time to talk about Severed.
C'est la bataille.
It's a challenge to even describe what Severed is. In the broadest of terms, I suppose you could call it an action-adventure game, but that doesn't actually say that much. The traversal through the world is done in the style of old first-person dungeon crawlers, where the entire map is divided into rooms and each new step forward brings you to the next section. The said map is that of a classic Metroidvania, complete with blocked passages and power-ups you find around the world that allow you to both progress through the story and reach previously inaccessible areas for optional goodies. Along the way you'll face many grotesque and legitimately terrifying enemies. You'll deal with them using touch controls. Yes, Severed requires a touchscreen to function, for its entire battle system is based around slashes you do with your finger or stylus. It starts easy enough, but the more you push forward, the more complex and tactical it gets. Some of the optional endgame encounters quite literally made me sweat. The game also has light RPG elements in the form of upgradable battle traits. During the fight you can cut monsters' body parts off and use them to amplify your being. How? I don't know, but the more you fight, the stronger you get, and that can be vital to surviving some of the more difficult encounters near the end. Your motivation for doing all this is simple. You play as a young female warrior whose homeland is ravaged by some powerful force. Her family members have been kidnapped and finding them is your only objective. You must travel through many different locations, all realized in a beautiful simplistic art style, accompanied by a wonderful soundtrack that I can't quite describe without saying something generic like it's unique and enigmatic and evocative, even though all of that is applicable here. It certainly gives each place you visit its own identity. I think that's a good way to put it. I'd also like to mention that some of the imagery you'll come across might appear rather disturbing and even morbid at times, but the stylized graphics serve well to never make it look gory. The overall tone of the game is somber and melancholic, and there's not much fun to be had here, but I absolutely adored Severed from beginning to end. Its atmosphere is so thick it's almost tangible. It feels as if you're being bathed in pure, soothing sadness. And it's a joy to be in this game's world. Severed is one of those very rare instances where I want to tell everybody about it. It's so unique, so original, so beautiful in every single regard. And it's such a crying shame that it doesn't seem like that many people know about it. Yeah. If you can afford only one game out of everything I've talked about today, this is the one I'd insist you pick up. It's so good. Please, for the love of God, play Severed. And that about wraps it up. I know I picked a smaller amount than Shawn did in his video, but that's simply the reality of things. A lot of great indies are expensive. The further down we go, the more and more we see those $20 price tags, and a lot of the time that asking price is justified. Some of my personal favorite indies are there on digital stores for $20, but I avoided including them because the list would be 3 positions long. So that's that. If this video does well, I'll probably do a follow-up because there's just so many great indies out there that are tons of fun. If you've played any of the games I mentioned, I'd love to hear about your experiences with them in the comments. And if you didn't know about some of these, I really hope my list helped you find something new to add to your collection. I honestly believe some of them are legitimately brilliant. But now that everything is said and done, I want to thank you for spending some time with me here. I'll be back with something else very soon. Until then, goodbye.